So, how do we deploy Oracle RAC quickly such that Dan can actually make his daughter's soccer game and there's no impact on his work-life balance and no issues with his family? Before we jump into how to deploy Oracle RAC on Nutanix, quickly want to mention that in a traditional legacy environment, this is not a trivial ask. This is a little bit more complex than just point-click deploy. In a traditional world, Dan would have to maybe interact with the compute team to carve out new compute, since this will be a new Oracle RAC database and database server. He might have to talk to the virtualization team to make sure they can help configuring VMware or the virtualization layer. He might have to talk to the storage team to carve out new storage or maybe do some SAN zoning, since this is a new database server. And in large enterprises, we typically have change control processes in place to make sure that we understand what changes are being made in the environment, to make sure we understand how things are being changed over time so that we can track any issues that may have occurred and avoid unplanned downtime and things that cost the business money when we don't have access to our apps. So if Dan had to follow the legacy way of doing things, he'd have a lot of change control. He'd have a lot of handoffs between teams. Different teams have different priorities. They might be chasing a Sev1 issue, so the storage team can't get to this until maybe tomorrow or until the issue's fixed. So how does he get this done before 2 p.m.? So fortunately, Dan invested in Nutanix Era, which is a database as a service tool. There's a lot of things that we can do. In this specific demo, we'll walk through how Dan provisioned an Oracle RAC server and database very quickly and without involving multiple teams. So what we have here is the Nutanix Era dashboard. And if I go into databases, Dan has already had this environment up for a while, so he has multiple different databases he's provisioned. He's already imported the golden image for Oracle and the specific software version of Oracle he wants to run. He's already deployed different profiles for compute, for network, to make sure that he has standardization in his environment. So what he's going to do is come into databases and he's going to hit provision. We're going to select Oracle. This is a clustered instance, and we'll do a 2-node cluster. We're going to create a new server. We could have a registered server if there's already one existing, but we're going to create a new one in this environment. So what this is going to be we'll make this the safe words database 2. We're going to use the small compute profile, production. We'll keep everything else default, database. The SID. We want to give him, it's only a terabyte, we'll give it a system password. And if I wanted to, I could do some pre-create commands, I could do some post-create commands, but in this example, we're just going to keep everything as it is. Okay. Now we want to provision the time machine. Now the time machine is essentially a backup schedule or a snapshot schedule that gets deployed. We have different SLAs. In this situation, I could create custom ones. We're using out of the box, so we're going to select gold. But what that's going to do is it's going to create a time machine such that we will constantly be pruning the transaction logs on the database server, and we can actually create restore points down to the last second, so the last transaction on the database. So we can provide essentially transaction level backups on this cluster and for this Oracle RAC cluster. So we're going to hit provision, and now we can just wait. So we'll see all of the tasks that are going to be run, and as I mentioned in the beginning, the traditional world, this would take quite a bit of time. So we're going to do some pre-processing. We're going to create the VMs for you on the Nutanix cluster. We're going to create the attached storage. We're going to configure the clusterware software, attach the ASM storage, make sure they're attached to both virtual machines since this is RAC, create the instance, create the RAC instance, register the RAC database, and then lastly configure the time machine within Era and those snapshot schedules. So after about 15 minutes or so, this should complete, and we can see that that was done much quicker, and Dan probably did that within 4 to 5 minutes. versus the hours or days or weeks potentially to get this done if we had to jump through multiple teams. So now we can see everything's done. After 12 minutes, 47 seconds, we provisioned a 2-node Oracle RAC cluster versus the time it would have taken in the legacy world could have been days, could have been weeks to get this done. So Dan finished this in 12 minutes and 47 seconds.